Welcome to our presentation on cloud computing for regulated life science environments. The topics that we will be discussing will be presented in 4 parts. The first part is characteristics of cloud computing. The second part will be considering whether to use cloud computing. The third part will be about what you should find out about your provider before you engage them. And the fourth part will be cloud computing issues and their influence on validation. So I think I'll turn it over to Leo, and I hope you enjoy the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty, and welcome everybody to the second part of our presentation. In this section, we're going to discuss what organizations need to consider before moving any of their services or any of their data to the cloud. Before even starting to consider moving any data or services to the cloud, an organization needs to establish requirements for their own IT department. What can happen sometimes is that the understanding or expectations of management do not coincide with the goals and duties of the IT department. So by documenting what the business requires from IT, as well as what IT requires to support the business, you make sure that everyone's heading in the right direction. Once we have established requirements, we need to really look at what the current state of IT is. This involves documenting what security measures you have in place, what your data is actually worth, where it is, and what controls you have in place currently. By doing this type of analysis, some organizations may find that their current operations aren't meeting their own requirements. And if that's the case, you certainly want to resolve those issues before considering any kind of cloud service. In analyzing the current state, organizations need to consider and document the laws and regulations that surround data in question. Focus on the data first and then build from there. And what you will get as a result of this type of assessment is a baseline of your current operations. And you're going to use this baseline to make decisions on whether or not to use any cloud services, and then eventually to evaluate the cloud service providers. Having documented the current state, an organization can begin to evaluate which data and which services are eligible to move to the cloud, and which ones are not even candidates because of regulatory considerations or possibly security or client issues. Making or even considering such a change should never be all or nothing. You should really test the waters with the least critical aspects of your IT operation first. So why are we looking to the cloud in the first place? There have to be some benefits, and there are. The first one, of course, as always, is cost. The savings, for the most part, come from consolidation and sharing of physical resources. Instead of a dedicated physical server performing a single service in an air-conditioned data center that's dedicated to a single organization, we can now have many virtual servers running in a single physical box that's housed alongside many other servers and devices and so on. Through the use of virtualization technology, we can optimize the utilization of resources. And by sharing facilities and utilities, we can cut down on wasted money. And in addition, we can minimize our impact on the environment. Besides cost savings, using cloud technology can have operational benefits as well, such as being able to expand capacity on demand, having 24/7 availability and access to your resources, shortening the amount of time that's required to deploy a service or an application, redundancy in the event of network failure, and so on. And in my opinion, cloud service providers are a lot of times better equipped and staffed to handle security threats than are small organizations that have limited resources. CSPs have, or at least should have, trained and experienced staff and cutting-edge equipment to respond to emergencies and to guard against security breaches. I would argue that it's much easier for a hacker or an assailant to infiltrate a mid-sized business or an organization than a provider whose main priority it is to protect and secure data. We talked about some of the benefits, now let's look at some of the challenges. First of all, if you're dealing with some types of regulated data, you have to consider data location. Some electronic data is not allowed to leave the country, so you have to make sure that you comply with those regulations. Also, for a lot of electronic records in the life sciences and healthcare industries, organizations must have control over where the records are being stored. And this type of control is not possible with the public cloud model, so a private or a community cloud would be the only viable options in that case. Another challenge that consumers are faced with is the ownership of data. All the data that's in the cloud, even though it's stored by the cloud service provider, is ultimately the responsibility of the consumer that's putting it there. So if an organization puts regulated data in the cloud, and the cloud service provider is hacked and the data is somehow compromised, the blame and responsibility will ultimately lie with the regulated company. Another challenge to consider is that some CSPs are either not able or not willing to work with regulated companies. And this is a lot of times because the provider doesn't have the necessary tools or the necessary knowledge to help their customers maintain compliance. To add to that, we have to consider the risks posed by lax hiring policies, inadequate employee training programs, poor security practices, and so on. In the next part of this presentation, we're going to talk about these and other issues that have to be considered when selecting a cloud service provider. To sum up, there are obviously many things for an organization to think about before making a decision to move data or services to the cloud. Some critical or regulated data may just have to remain in-house forever, and some, if properly protected, may be okay to move off-site to a private cloud, for example, without adding too much risk.
Thank you for your interest in our cloud computing presentation. We started Globio because we saw a lot of inefficiencies and waste in the industry. We exist to help make FDA compliance efficient and to lower costs. Our core value is value through innovation, and we not only believe it, we live it. Please contact us today and see how we can help you. Thank you.